The transition from crime to the management of this phenomenon is possible, and Italy is proving it with 1/3 reduction of arrivals this year. A 70% reduction in arrivals from July to present, and with a drastic reduction of deaths at sea.
Well, that was Italy's Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni at the end of last year, effectively declaring that their refugee crisis was all but over. But did his announcement come too soon? On Monday, as many as 64 refugees drowned trying to reach Italy from Libya, the Mediterranean's first tragedy of 2018. But Rome says their efforts to stop refugee arrivals have been successful. Between 2016 and 2017, the numbers entering the country dropped by 1/3, but some argue their methods are too costly. The Italian government reportedly pays Libyan militias to stop smugglers. And with many more people still desperate to escape poverty and violence, can Italy call this a success? Well, to help us understand the situation better, I'm joined now by Italy's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Emma Bonino. She's also a former EU Commissioner. Ma'am, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. The Prime Minister has said this is a success. It's a historic transition from immigration managed by criminals, as he called it, to controlled, legal and safe migration. The numbers are down, fewer people are dying. Why do you disagree with him?
Well, the fact is that whatever you mean by success, for instance, just take January, the beginning has been very bad. 1,200 have been rescued by the Italian Coast Guard and brought to Italy. 700 people are being captured, basically by the Libyan Coast Guard, and brought back to the detention center, and they will disappear there. Nobody will know what happens to them. And in the meantime, by hundreds, they've been drowned at sea. So I don't know from what ground humanity, legally, it's claimed a success. And by the way, remember that it's January with very bad weather. Mm-hmm. So it's true that they have the landing has been diminished in Italy, but it means simply that more people are dying and more people are brought back to the terrible, terrible Libyan detention center.
Yeah,
so I
yes.
don't think this is a success.
Yes, the fact that the government is working with Libya, that Libya doesn't have a formal centralized authority, it's split in two in many ways, and that there are these reports that the government's working with militias at a time when we've seen videos of especially black men being sold as slaves, literal slaves in markets. Is there any debate within Italy about whether this is morally justified?
Well, there were a very strong debate, let's say in September, October, November, when, by the way, we were running the campaign, that was a very successful campaign, collecting signatures for modification of the Italian law on integration. But now, media have been accustomed, and on top of that, we are at the beginning of the electoral campaign. So the priority of the news are different. Of course, the government has all the interest of claiming positive results, which are very doubtful in my opinion. But the high priority debate on the electoral campaign are disregarding these tragedies in the Mediterranean. Yes. Political parties are much more involved in economic, internal situation, relation with Europe. So we are struggling to keep this issue on the front page of the newspaper and social.
Yes, interesting, those legislative elections on the horizon set for March 2018. Let me ask you about any regrets you might have about when you were in office. When you were the Minister for Foreign Affairs, you were in office for about a year. I looked at the IOM numbers. Around about that time, at least 700 people died trying to cross over. Yes, the politics were different at that time. The Syrian war was at a different phase. Lots of things were different. But looking back now, could you have done anything personally differently to prevent these tragedies when you had the power?
Well, what I'm very proud of having done with Prime Minister Letta is to start the Mare Nostrum program. And it was the first time that Italian boat with NGOs started this search and rescue after the tragedies, by the way, on our own, because Europe, member states of Europe didn't want it to help. So I'm very proud that we started this program that had some success. But the point again, I was in charge for 10 months, and the following minister and government stopped the program, and then it was, let's say, done again at European level. But the point is that you cannot stop completely this flow. And the point is that in a declining demographic Europe, you have to open up legal channels of immigration and a serious program of integration. That has not been done. I couldn't make it in 10 months, of course, but I'm very proud that with the Governo Letta, we started the Mare Nostrum, underlining to member states in Europe and to our public opinion that there was a tragedy going on since months that nobody cared about.
Yeah, and around about that time, I was in Lampedusa, and I witnessed the Italian Coast Guard rescue people. They went out about 100 kilometers out. There was a boat that had capsized. They rescued more than 100 people. They brought them in. Now, what I found interesting about this is that this was tremendously humane, very efficient, and very well done. They treated these people extremely well on Lampedusa. On the other hand, the locals that I spoke to in Lampedusa were totally against this. They said, why do we have to send our Coast Guard out so far out to rescue these people? This is not our problem. These are not our wars. What are we going to do with these people? So let me then ask you, you have these ideas. You want your government to accept these people, but maybe that's against the grain in your country. Democratically, the majority don't want this policy. Is that how it is?
Well, no, I don't think it's so. I think that the question of the immigrants' invasion has been a highly politically manipulated item. I don't deny it's a problem, but I deny strongly that it is an invasion. And I do believe that people, of course, in Lampedusa, which is a very, very small island, of course, felt abandoned in some way. And from the human point of view, I can understand them. But the question is that it's not a Lampedusa issue. It's at least a national issue, and more of that is a European issue. But that is what has not happened yet. And of course, if it doesn't become European priorities, Italy will not be able to cope on her own. What we are also trying, and I'm not so sure, is to intervene in Africa, trying to foster their economic conditions. But that will take generations. So we should do it. I'm nothing against. But that developing the economic in Africa will take generation. And I started pointing the priority for Africa in the 80s.
Yes.
And I was trying to make people understand that if we don't care of Africa, one day Africa will be will come to Europe, evidently. So we are late, and now we have to deal this transition, hoping that the economic development in Africa will boom, but that
Understood.
again will take generation. In the meantime, global mobility is an issue that becomes to humanity. People have moved always, always.
Absolutely.
Italians have been emigrating by millions in between the two wars. I'm saying by millions.
Yes.
Out of poverty, looking for better solutions. So we know what we are talking about. And in a rich and declining, demographically speaking, Europe, be it Italy, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Bulgaria, and etc., and at 300 kilometers you have a sort of a kindergarten with a demographic explosion. That is the issue that has to be managed, and I understand that that's not the responsibility of a small Lampedusa island.
Emma Bonino, it's been a pleasure having you on the Newsmakers. Thank you very much for joining us.